Yesterday only I have introduced him. He is having the sound biodata, administrative and academic experience.
Hello, dear friends. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. Audible. Audible. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, sir, you are audible. Please proceed.
Yeah. So, dear friends, very good morning to one and all. Today I'll be dealing with the structure of thesis and dissertation writing. So, can anyone recollect yesterday's topics, what we have discussed? Anyone? Okay.
Okay, sir.
Can anyone tell what is there on the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, I'm asking the participants, sir. I'm asking the participants, can anyone tell what is there on the screen, which I have put it? Can anyone correlate with this picture? Friends, please respond.
Yes, sir. It's timer.
Yeah, we call it as hourglass. So what does it indicate?
Timer.
Okay. Can you relate it with research?
Yes, sir.
How?
It's a time limit. I think so.
Okay, very nice. Any other? Any other? Right. So friends, when we imagine our research with this hourglass, or we can say the timer shape, which I have put it here. So it is, if what we see here is that it on top, it is broad. And then what happens? Gradually, it narrows to a point, and then it starts to broaden again, isn't it? So this is how actually the research should look like, because the research which we are, going to do, it actually, it should start with a very general point of view, or in other words, we can say it is a very broad in the initial stage. Then it sets the real context of the research when we do the what we call as the review of literature, or what we call it as the research in others people's work. And then what happens? It leads to a what you call as a critical review, which reaches to a research question. So here we see that it narrows down to a certain point. And at this narrowing point, what we see is that there should be a precise and logical statement. So here, when we are adopting the methodology, and the methodology how to approach this question, then actually it widens or broadens the study area or the research study. So the approach to the question, it begins to broaden it out, and the research study which is there, that is designed in a way to make the what we call the operational of the research, the ideas which it takes to the further. So here what it intends is that the research results that are the likely to lead outwards with the implication, and then what we see into the discussions that begin to actually draw out the implication for the field of what we call the subject in general. So here we need to understand, because when we see that you begin to start your thesis, to write your thesis or to start your research work, it looks like very broad. And then after going through the lots of review of literature, what happens? It actually narrows down. You'll be getting an idea where what exactly you want to do with your research work. And then when it narrows down, as I said yesterday, when you narrow down the one or two broad questions, then actually it broadens the field of your research with many ideas, with many secondary questions. That is how the research begins, and that is how your structure of thesis actually comes into the picture. So when we talk about the research, we see that the research should aim to provide some new insights and analysis, isn't it? So without giving your inputs, it is not a research. It is just like a monograph. It is just like a what you call a kind of an text which you are putting forth. No, you should provide some insights and the analysis, which should help us to understand the research question in a better way. Because when you start your research, first and foremost thing is that you will be having a clarity of what you are going to do and how you are going to achieve that research question, isn't it? So here in the process of answering the research question, there is always something to learn from the conduct of the research. So when you start doing the research, one has to be very positive and one has to search for the real explanation of your findings. Because at the beginning, at every what you call, even if you want to write a paper, or even if you, if you start doing some research work, it seems to be very limited at the initial stages. But as you go on reading with the what you call the lots of review of literature, you will be finding your solutions, you will finding your answers in that review of literature, and you will finally come up with your what we call as the final answer to the research question. So to do that, what we have to do is that one has to be very systematic, one has to be concise, one has to be positive and be precise in what you are saying and how you apply the format to the research question. So these things are very important when you are doing your research work. So the thing is that there is a lot of confusion regarding what we call it as the difference between the thesis and the dissertation, because different countries, they give different what we call as definitions regarding the thesis and regarding the dissertation. So a thesis is critically written scholarly piece of research work. In other words, we can say typically it is submitted by students graduating either from a master's program or for the PhDs. So here the purpose of thesis is to allow students to showcase their knowledge and expertise within the subject matter they have been studying as a part of the program. While when we talk about the dissertation, it is comparatively a lengthier piece of scholarly writing that accounts your research work throughout the doctoral program. So a researcher earns the PhD after submitting and defending his or her dissertation. It includes all information about the original research or expanded research on a new or existing topic conducted by the PhD candidate. Isn't it? So here, you see, we are always stuck up when you are writing a paper or writing something. You see, you in between while typing, you are stuck up with these spelling issues, because the American language is different and the British English is different. And usually, we the Indians follow the British English. You see, so for example, we see that neighbor or labor. what we write is LABOUR. That is the British English. But whereas the American English, he says LABOR. That's all. So with this, I mean, the kind of what you call the explanation that one gets through the dissertation, or what we call as the thesis, is totally different. So what are the differences between these two? Is that the primary difference between the thesis and dissertation is the time of when they are completed. And as I have given in the earlier, the slide regarding the thesis and definition, see, thesis is nothing but it's related to master's program, whereas dissertation is related to the PhD program. And we have said that a thesis is nothing but it is a compilation of research, ensuring that the researcher is well informed and has the knowledge about the research topic, which he has learned in the study program. Whereas, on the other hand, a dissertation, that it provides an opportunity for the researcher to contribute to new theories, new models, and the information to what is already existing literature in the research field. So here we see that the difference between the thesis and the dissertation, when we are talking about a thesis, is approximately what we call, it is about 100 pages in length. But when we have the dissertation, or we can what we say the PhD dissertation, it should be much longer than a thesis, and it should include the background of the research and the information. So here the dissertation, it actually includes your what you call the synopsis, the review of literature, the idea of research topic, and every what you call the minute detail about the research work. So these are some of the what we usually call in an ideal situation, that the dissertation, it is nothing but it is inclusive of all the details that what we have mentioned, and should be what we call more than the thesis. And usually we see that when you are writing a dissertation, it is what we call PhD dissertation, it is about not less than 250 pages. Because right from the chapter introduction to the summary and conclusion, and the main objective points which you make it into the form of the chapterization, that gives the real content of the what you call dissertation. So when we are talking about what you call the similarities between these two, what are the similarities that have, is that they are usually, you see, when you are talking about the thesis and dissertation, they are nothing but the final output or the final project which are required to submit at the end of the respective programs, be it the master's or the PhD program. Both require what? The deep and accurate understanding of the research problem. And we see that both forms are very well written, or we can, in other words, we can say that they are these scholarly written pieces, and they must address the specific research questions. And the academic writing skills, as we have been discussing yesterday about the academic writing skills, which are very imperative for the thesis as well as the dissertation. Because without the writing, what you call written articulation, it is, I think, not acceptable in the academic circle. And above that, the important thing is the ethical practices. They must be, I would say, that followed in a very what we call the collating and the document research data. Because when you are using certain data, you have to quote the source of that data. Otherwise, it will be assumed that you are using your own data, which is not appropriate. So the ethical practices, that is very important when you write your master's thesis or the PhD dissertation. And then in UGC has, you all know that the plagiarism is not at all accepted in any form. If you are taking some paragraph, you have to cite that paragraph. that you have taken, and when you cite that paragraph, you have to put that in inverted commas. So when you put that in inverted commas, it means that you have taken that quote from some source of book or the paper. So the plagiarism has become one of the most important aspects in the recent times when it comes to the research papers or to the dissertations or what we call as the thesis. And above that, both the thesis and dissertation, they require the what we call the highly analytical skills to support their findings. What tools you have used in your thesis, and what the research question when you are talking about that, how you are able to support that research topic with the help of the what we call the empirical data by using the analytical tools and the skills which you have put in and to the support of your findings. And then both the thesis and dissertation, they require the intense editing and also the critical what we call as proofreading before the final submission. As I said yesterday, that when you are putting your ideas on paper and putting it in public domain, they are in a way you are inviting both aspects, that is appreciation as well as the criticism. So before going to submit your thesis or dissertation, you need to go through do the intense editing and critical proofreading, which are very essential for any what we call as the thesis or dissertation. So if you see that who actually, where we call it as thesis and dissertation, thesis and dissertation. So according to the US, the thesis is nothing but a shorter than a dissertation and involves preliminary research which helps you earn a master's degree. And whereas the EU and UK, it is thesis is known as an original research work that helps to obtain a PhD degree. So that's why, because we follow the British English and the British mode of education system, we call our PhD degree what we call that work as the thesis. Whereas the dissertation, it is in US, it is they call it as constitutes an original research project and helps obtain a doctorate degree. But in EU, European Union and UK, they call it as a part of master's degree involving a broader research project. So you see how they are actually what do you call called. So the basic question is, why the what do you call writing a research is so difficult? So here I want to ask you one question. How many of you have really felt it difficult in writing what you call as the thesis very difficult? Can anyone tell, please? Dear friends, how many of you have really felt difficult in writing or starting the your thesis or dissertation work? Can anyone? How many of you really felt it difficult in writing or to begin with? Anyone? Can anyone please answer my question? If you felt difficult, what is the magnitude of difficulty? If you have not felt any difficulty, with what ease you are able to write? Please answer this question.
Sir,
Right.
drafting is very difficult.
Yeah.
Drafting of our thesis and dissertation is very difficult.
Why? Why it is difficult?
Some techniques, tools which we used that are also very difficult to express in particular manner. It is difficult.
Is it the tools or is it the language?
Language.
Yeah. Any other answer? So dear friends, you see, one first thing we should keep in mind is that English is not our native language, right? And we learn, it is a foreign language, and unfortunately it is the importance is given so much about the English language that if you don't know English, you are of no use, you are nothing. That is very wrong. The basic concept itself is very wrong about the English language. When you are very well very well versed with your own mother tongue, English is not a difficult language. It is I would say that it is a gamble of 26 letters, isn't it? A to Z, it is between A to Z, that's all. So here the question is, this question is not only asked by students but even by the lecturers and the professors. So the thing is that very often the beginning of the problem, or we can say that is not with the writing actually, but it is actually, you see, when you see the blank white paper or the blank paper, it creates a host of emotions, isn't it? Because from where you have to start, what you have to write, how is my English good or bad? That is where it creates a whole lot of emotions when you see a blank paper. And I have seen many of my students, because they come from the Telugu medium background, they have the knowledge, but unfortunately they cannot write the English even one sentence. So that is where the biggest problem lies, and the difficulty to start writing the thesis or any paper. So you see what happens at the beginning, there is a feeling that you have to get everything right. When you start writing for the first time, you think that for the first time you have to get everything right, because you are being judged on what you write. Because we think of others rather than ourselves. When you are sitting in your room and when you are putting your ideas on paper, we don't think that we don't think about what we are writing, but we think about what others will be thinking of your writing. That is the biggest problem. That is the biggest difficulty, or we can say the mind block, which every Indian has. So the thing is that one has to start writing. You get isolated. If you are not confident of what you are writing, you get isolated. You start writing, at least start writing something. Then you can edit it. You can read once, twice, thrice, or 4 times, 10 times, read 10 times, and you edit it. And I would say that because the simple what you call fact, if you accept that, if you submit the report, we are afraid of the criticism, because unfortunately in the academic circles, we first try to criticize rather than understanding what the other person has put his research question. So you see, sometimes you don't understand or you don't know what to write, but your mind is blocked with the impression that you need to prepare a thick report. And what happens is, at the end of where you are writing, it is what you call likely to be a very below normal submission of the thesis. And some of the people, what you call scholars, they think that they are not qualified, and some people think that they are not qualified to be criticized to the works what they have done, isn't it? So the question is, how much you have read. Here the read means how much knowledge you have about the domain subject is of topmost importance. Your writing in the form of paper or in the form of the thesis is nothing but it is how much, I mean, the paper is more likely to be cited by others rather than the critical evaluation of the work that you have done. That is very important. So here we see that there are, I mean, the common mistakes that students who actually start their writing the work, because we normally see that we don't go or do the thorough reading, proofreading, or the thorough editing. So here we have to gain the confidence by going through the what I call the thorough editing as well as the critical proofreading, which actually enhances the abilities, like the academic writing abilities, because your style of writing is very critical in persuading your reader about the validity of your ideas. Because yesterday I said that you have the writing should be very persuasive. You have to persuade the reader, the audience who are reading your work. So when you start doing that, the confidence actually it helps you to achieve in improving your writing styles, and it makes you and your work believable. People should believe what you have written. And when people will believe? When you give the empirical data, use the analytical tools, and answer the research question through your findings. If you do that, automatically your work which is there, you will get more of appreciation rather than the criticism. So here the thing is that when you actually start writing the dissertation thesis, what you have to do. So the things which you need to do generally, because I have given here particular and general different topics. So when you are going to do, think about how to capture and maintain your reader's interest. So if you are presenting a paper, if you are submitting a thesis, so these two things, they have to maintain the what you call the interest in the reader's mind. So here what happens when the people view the writing stage of what you call the work which you are doing, it as a boring, what they'll do, they'll just keep it aside, because the topic which you choose, that might have been left by them long ago, and it may the topic may not be relevant to the present context, or it may not, or it may no longer give interest to them. So they can they can quote or they can cite in their research work, and this should definitely not be the case in your work. So there are several things one can actually do safeguard against such kind of things. So when you are doing your thesis, the first thing is to start writing up as soon as you can, because as the days pass on, the interest, the zeal, may not be the same by the end of the 5th year of your thesis, or the situation as it is today may not be the same over a period of time. So this actually, when you start writing up as soon as early as possible, this will help against the failures of the human memory. Because today the ideas may be fresh, but the same idea may not be remembered after 2 years. That is the very important and critical aspect in research research component. So the next thing is that before you start writing, make sure that you are in the right mood. Because if you had a fight with your friend or with your family members, you are in not right frame of mind. So you have to motivate yourselves. How you motivate yourself? You motivate yourself by motivating others, isn't it? And the other important aspect is that when you are writing the report, one has to view the report as a way of imparting knowledge to others. Because you know what you are going to tell, but you should write in such a way that you are giving some kind of knowledge to the others. And you should remember that one thing, that after completing your thesis, the research should be in such a way that no one else has done. And you should able to tell to the people that what findings you have found in your research works is not done by any other. It should not be a kind of a bit of boring piece of paper, but instead it should have more of excitement in what you have done. Because when a reader is reading his your work, he should get curiosity what next is going to come and what you have done. So in a way, I would say that you will be in a position to help the scientific community by putting together all the the research work which you have done, the information which you have collected, and the gap which you have filled, and what you call the puzzles which you have solved, which no one has done. That is very important in terms of the creating the interest in the reader community. Your report should help the reader appreciate the overall the complexity or the puzzles which has been created, and how the your research, it actually helps to answer certain questions within the complexity or the what we call the puzzle. So here it is very important to maintain that interest among the readers. Now coming to the second one, the writing skills, or I can say the writing style. Because the writing style is very important element, isn't it? Or we can say the style which you are representing is an important element of a good writing. Because you know that how you say something is as important as that you say. After all, we see that the reader's comprehension which is there of what you are saying, it is dependent solely on what you, the way you are saying it and the way you are writing it. And above all, we could say that the quality of presentation of your ideas, it actually reflects the quality of your mind. And always remember in your mind that you should never write using a very sloppy kind of English. Because the words, the vocabulary which you use, that reflects your command on the subject and the English as well. because many people, they stumble over very badly, or over bad, what you can say that they are badly constructed sentences, and they will have to go, what we call it, they'll have to read and reread the sentences to make it what you call the proper information which they need to make it to fit all together. So what one must do is to work towards the what you call the achieving the clarity in what you are going to put before the audience. So if you can write clearly, the reading pace of the reader will be very faster, and there is more likely to ensure that the reader does not lose any interest, and it is less likely to lose the thread of the argument which you have put forth in the form of your research. And coming to the next one, keep in mind your aim to inform your reader. So what is that you are informing to your readers? It means that you need to be a reliable source of information. You must persuade as well as inform the reader that your work is very credible. And if you can demonstrate that you have researched an area accurately and you have reported the works of others clearly and honestly, then you raise your own credibility. Because when you are citing, when you are quoting the source or the references, it means you are very, I would say that, true to yourself, that you have taken your that this information from so and so person and so and so so and so agency. By doing this, it makes I would say it makes it more likely about the reader to accept your own ideas. So this will actually what I would say lead to the what we call the 2 points. That is, one is providing explanations. So here it is not enough to provide your reader with the fact what you are putting it forth. You must also endeavor to provide the explanations. And here one should be aiming to do is to provide the reader with a logical path through what may otherwise the what we call be a maze of the facts and theories. So by doing this, by the interrelating the theoretical ideas with the facts, with the what you call the review of literature, it actually gives you support to your credibility and to your work. And I would say that when you are putting there with the facts, some of the facts that one has to do before the submitting thesis, that you have to actually evaluate the work that you that you contradiction with the published literature. And you may not feel that you are in a position to critically evaluate someone else's works as yet. So here I would like to say that the fresh eye is no worse than an experienced eye. It means that the good minds which are eminently capable of evaluating the set of data, they have more of understanding critically than just plain thinking. And the second thing is that the maintain honesty in your report writing. This is the most important one, because maintaining honesty, it means not being selective in the facts that one we use or that seems to have extreme validity, because it doesn't take to have to get the facts a trained mind. It should have the skills to review all the information that is available, whether it supports your ideas or not. Because when you opine an hypothesis, the hypothesis may be null, or I would say it may be yes or it may be no. Because you are, whatever is there, you are the skill and information which is available. It has to guide the information which is there. It has to guide the reader to set to what you call to set off a logical question. So this is what one should be aiming to do. And anything that is, I would say that anything that else would be dishonest to the scientific community. And you will be critically, what we call, the criticism, as I said in the beginning, when you put forth your ideas, you should be open to your criticism and to the appreciation, both equally, and you should balance it. And this, what we call the selective information which is there, and that which you have reviewed, they should include all the relevant information. And never ever you should see that whatever the review of literature you are doing, it should not be in a criticism form, because no one should criticize the other works unless you have the authority over it. That is very important. And then the quality is better than quantity. So here it is what we call as not how much you write that is important. Quality is what you should be aiming for. A long report can reflect what we call as a lot of interesting ideas, but it cannot reflect the work of the writer who takes these several pages to say that you should have been said in several lines. No. The quality means it justifies the length. The length wherein within you can explain that 10 lines can be explained in 2 to 3 lines. Quality justifies the length, but length does not justify your quality. That one should always remember. So here, when we are talking about the things to do in particular, till now we have discussed about in general. Now, in particular, we will be discussing about this. So, in particular, the use of passive voice. So this puts the writer in the background, and so it puts the ideas in the foreground. The ideas are, after all, the important bits. Okay. So you should not be active voice, but it should be in a passive voice. And then you have to be concise. As I said yesterday, you have to use a short title to grab the attention of the reader. And you have to maintain the consciousness to maintain the interest. That is very important. You have to be precise in what you are doing. So you have to use the words that most closely to say that you want. Do not settle for the words and convey the approximate meaning. Keep a dictionary or the thesaurus nearby if you need to it, because we are not very much well versed with the English. We need to be very much what we call as learn more things by using the thesaurus and using the what we call the appropriate vocabulary. So if you find that if two words are as good as each other, one need to use the simpler words, because it will be more reader friendly. Because if you are using the jargon, if you are using the the words which are not known to the reader or which are not familiar with the reader, then it will be very difficult. Then use examples. The examples are useful to help the reader understand very particularly about the difficult ideas, or to what we call the illustrate the ambiguous points which you put forth. So here what happens is that when you use the examples, they support the ideas that you present, and it increases your credibility in the reader's point of view. So when you use the examples, when you cite the sources of the findings, then definitely it will bring a lot of credibility to your work. And when you use the summary statements, this actually helps the reader to follow the structure of your writing. So usually when we write the PhD thesis, we see that when we complete the first chapter or each and individual chapter, we write the follow-up. What we say that we are, till this we give a summary, and then we say that the next chapter will follow in this manner. So here you are using two things, that you are helping the reader to follow the structure of your writing at one point, and you are also allowing them to recap on the important ideas before moving on to the next chapter. This is very important because here you are maintaining the continuity of your research. You are maintaining the interest of the reader in your research work. That is what one has to actually do it. And then use the transition statements. So these statements actually, they direct the reader to change to a change of idea or topic, and it will help them to follow your argument. So here, if one can say that, like what we say that I will now go on to discuss things that you should not do when writing. Okay, so these things will definitely help in maintaining the interest of the readers wish to. So now, things that you should not do. Till now, we said things to do and things not to do in general and particular. So when we are talking in general things which you should not do, is that the most important thing is that avoid slating the works of others. As I said earlier, one should not criticize the other's work, because it will be the what we call as the unprofessional. It is common for people, you see, to be very protective of their work, and when you criticize, it is often what we call an attack on works, on other works in the academic circles. So if you are writing an article, or if you are writing an article for publication, it is certain that it is to be sent to the person whose work you are evaluating. So the unqualified or unprofessional attack or criticism is not a good idea. But on the other hand, one has to critically assess, which should be encouraging, but it should not be criticizing, where because we need to have certain line. We have to draw a line in terms of limiting our attack, or we can say limiting our criticism in the academic circles. So when you are evaluating critically, you have to back up your evaluation with evidence of your own work or from the published sources. And when you are evaluating critically, you should make sure that you have to cite the sources of the evidences, so that the reader can verify or refer it with the sources. That is very, because if you are negating with the idea, you should actually cite the sources so that the reader can actually verify it. And the second one is avoid proof by indirect means. So what does this means? It means that just because if you are quoting one theory, that does not account for what you call finding it, it doesn't mean that your theory does or is therefore correct. You have to have the proof for alternative theoretical explanations. And this must come from a direct test of the prediction of the results that you have been showing you in your research from the what you call the alternative theories, because no other support can be considered valid or reliable. So ideally one should support for an alternative theory that should come from one method which has been replicated, or from several methods which all will converge to give the same conclusion. And here a single source of support or information is not considered as a very strong. You see, when you use the analytical tools, we use some kind of what you call the source, because the source which when you are using quantitative statistical techniques, it is tested over time and again, used by many, and that's why we use those formulas and we use those theories. And the next thing is that avoid being condescending. Here, when you are writing, you should write with confidence, and you should avoid developing the style that sounds too cocky or too flowery, isn't it? So actually this has the effect of irritating the reader than actually you are reinforcing with your own ideas. And you should never use the words like of course, clearly, obviously, etc. These are not academic words. You should not, I would say that, make the reader feel that your understanding or what you are putting forth, you should not think that the reader does not know anything. No, in a way we will be fooling ourselves. And the next thing is that avoid blinkered selectivity. So one should not use only the information that support your case, because this is not the honest scientific report. You have to put the facts, what it is there. One should not misrepresent the literature. Ultimately, this will bring down your credibility as a researcher, nothing else. Never manipulate the what you call the review of literature or the facts which you put on the paper. And then the things that should not be done in particular is that you have to avoid using long words. As I said, one should not use the jargons. You should use simple day-to-day, everyday words rather than trying to sound what you call very highbrow type or what you call flowery type. One should use the technical terms, and one should be sure to define them for the first time when you use them. That is very important. So they have to be very crystal clear, short and sweet words. And again, avoid the redundancy. Redundancy is nothing but you have to cut out the repetition. Once you have given the sentence, it should not be repeated again. Because if you are repeating yourself for the sake of what you call emphasis, then it is definitely not going to impress or it does not have any express of what you are trying to say. You have to rewrite the sentence rather than saying it over and over again. If you are failing in this, it means that you are confused yourself and you are confusing the readers, and they will, I would say that, miss the what you call the structure of the reading, and also they'll have a disinterest in reading your data, in reading your work. And then, as I said, avoid digressions. This is nothing but do not go off at a tangent. You should discuss your points that is slightly aside from the main argument. Then you have to use them as footnotes. Okay, and avoid over explanation. One should never over explain for the sake of emphasis on the what you want to put forth. It does not require, because if you are overemphasizing, it means you are giving disinterest to the reader. So when, as I said in the beginning, you should do a thorough editing, and you have to go back, you have to look back to the initial explanation and make sure that what you have written is as clear as possible to the extent. And the fifth one is avoid overstating your case. Here you see, you are selling your ideas is much more effective than if you do it more gently than doing it in a louder way. So here, if you are saying that yours is the only theory that could be possible account for making findings, rather than somewhat short-sighted, somewhat others are said is kind of a short-sightedness. Never think that we are the only one who can give the solution. That is very wrong. You should not overstate that, because we have seen time and again that the theories are always superseded. So when you are making strong claims that about the theories which you have put forth, in a way you are reducing your credibility, which shows that you have not properly examined the earlier theories or findings or the literature which are there already existing in the form of various formats. So I would say that it is wise to express a certain amount of caution in your writing, which actually gives you a lot of information before you put forth. And the sixth one is avoid the sexist language. Here, do not use he or she in the language, because when you are using that word, we need to overcome the consequential wordiness, and one can use the plural pronoun. Like if you say that once the subjects had completed the task, they were debriefed. So here the subjects means either it can be girl or boy, or he or she, male or female, etc. So you are not using one particular gender, because today we are seeing that the gender equality, gender empowerment, everything is coming to the forefront. So to avoid criticism from that, there is no need to mention or the need to nominate the gender in the research work. So we should avoid these languages in our research work. So here are some of the commonly misused words like adapt and adopt, among and between, amount of and number of, compare to, compare with, and continual, continuous, data, datum, fewer or less, imply or infer, like that. You see, these are the commonly misused words when you actually put forth in your research work. So with this, you need to be very careful of what you want to express actually. So as I said, the vocabulary which you are using in the your thesis, they have to be very very crisp and crystal. So you see, these are some of the things which one actually need to learn more from the previous works which have been done in the form of the revealed literature. So coming to the important aspect, how to structure a thesis. This is very important. So friends, is my slide moving? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it is how to structure a thesis. I mean, that's slide, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So when you are structuring a thesis, we all know that there is nothing different from what usual thesis we have. But how to express this thesis is important. So if you see, the most important and the most daunting task is how to start a thesis. So you find that there are so many questions in the beginning. How do you actually start your thesis? How do you structure it? And what information should the individual chapters contain? And each what you call subject, each program, it has a different demands from the thesis structure, which because sciences has a different structure, social sciences has a different structure, arts has a different like that. So these, I mean, they're asking the requirements of the course which you are doing at the first. It is one of the first step. But you find that there is there is not much flexibility when it comes to the structuring of the thesis in general. So here we see that this is a generic structure of the thesis, which looks like that: the abstract, introduction, literature review, methods, result, discussion, and the conclusion. So yesterday when we were discussing the question of why and how, so if you are answering the first question, that is why you should know what your personal interest in this topic is, and if and why it is relevant in general. So if you are interested in some topic on some area of in Latur, but does that area is of is it relevant to in general to the common people? That is very important. And why this particular topic is it matters in real life too, because you can also, when you are doing that, you will be giving the background information here. So when you start doing that, actually you are answering the questions, and you can bring I would say that ground your whole paper from the what you call the onset, and the readers that you are expecting will does not have the answers to these questions themselves, because the ideas which are coming to your mind may not be the similar with the others. And in answering the how, you should briefly explain and how you are going to reach your research goals. That is very important. So some of the researchers, they try to answer the question in the what you call the methods chapter by giving it an objectives, and some they give a quick overview in some of the chapters. So here we see that when you start introduction, why is the topic being studied? That is very important. And how is the topic is being studied? And what is being studied is an important question when you start it. So here the introduction will give the understanding of the whole thesis itself. And when you're talking about the review of literature, as we have been discussing since yesterday, use a wide array of sources, show both sides of the coin, both the positive and the negative. Make sure to cover the classics in your field. From where the origin, from where this concept has come. This will give the credibility. And make sure that you present everything in a clear and structured manner. That gives you a lot of satisfaction to yourself, because it may in future be cited or be quoted in their works. These are very important. And coming to the what we call the methods, we have seen yesterday itself how the methodology that is being, it actually the outlines of the methods that you choose to gather the data, that database is being analyzed, and you justify why you have chosen that methodology. Because each what we say is that no thesis will have the same kind of methodology, because the topic which you choose, you have your own kind of methodology, because it shows how you have chosen your design and the research methods that is suited to answer your question. That is nothing but to answer your research question. So one must make sure to explain that what are the pitfalls of your approaches and how you have tried to mitigate them. These are very important. So how you achieve this, how you do it? When you discuss yourself with your study, think over it, and you will definitely give the credibility, as it is it shows the interest of the reader, that you are aware of the limitations of your study. That is very important. Then the results. Here you see, when you are writing the result chapter, it outlines what you have found in relation to your research questions or the hypothesis. It contains the facts of your research and does not include a lot of analysis, because what happens mostly is the discussion chapter. In results, you will be putting lots of visualizations, like the using of tables, graphs, maps, etc. But when it comes to discussion, it includes your own analysis and interpretation of the data you have gathered, and the comments on your results, and explains what actually you want to. So this gives an opportunity to show that you have an understanding of the subject which you have taken up, and your findings and their significance. And when you show the limitations in your study, this will definitely give credibility, and also leave the questions where further research can be done. So this, I would say that will definitely go to the last chapter, that is the conclusion, where you highlight your research objectives which you have achieved, and you have contributed to the all parties which involved in the research work. And here in the conclusion, one must also point out the limitations of their study, because showing the awareness of your limitations, it gives you a better grounding of your thesis, and this will definitely bring in a lot of credibility. So this is about the how your dissertation research work has to be. And if you are going for the scientific reports, can I continue with this, sir, for in brief?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh.
Yes, sir. So when you are talking about the scientific writing scientific reports, these are basically what we call it as academic journals, where there is a certain conformity of style and conviction. The presentation one should be aiming to replicate, because not all journals have the same format or the same style. So they have their own way of style of writing. So this is it is always better to know the format first and start writing, because the what we say, the convention, it actually dictates the experimental articles that are mainly divided into certain sections. So the reader needs to know what exactly what you have done and how you did it. That is very important. And they should understand why you have taken and why you have done this, and they should know that what you have found, what are the results that you I mean the outcome are there. So these they are the different what you call the information which you have often put in separate what you call sections, which helps actually the reader to use the article more effectively. And they can use your article, they can cite your article in further what you call research. So here we can say that what you call there is no what you call a single correct way to set out a report or article, because they have a certain general guidelines which one has to adapt the structure to give a report to suit the your material. So here the effective communication is one of the key concern, and is more important than whether what you say, whether or not you have correctly parceled your information or not. So we need to go through first what we call the title. The title, as we said, that it should be very concise, informative, and yet economical with the words, because the title is not just an irrelevant phrase stuck at the beginning of the article. It should be very clear. So apart from that, the key words which are there, they recognize the words that all others within the area used to designate this idea of their interest. So then you have to the abstract, as I said, it is one yesterday about 200 words by the ICSSR. It should be 150 to 200 words, and should be offer summary of the dissertation. It should be very brief, and it should be prompt, and it should what you say that use the couple of sentence where you can make a meaningful this thing. So here it should be briefly state how the your results that are being interpreted in this section. So here this actually precedes the body of the paper, but it is sometimes useful to write it at the last also. So this is the introduction which we have already discussed about, and citing of the works is very important. So we see that the citing of the works, what we see is that the how different you see we have APA method, we have Chicago method, others. So usually when you are using the social sciences, the Chicago method is used, or the MLA type is used. So it is the what do you call the journals, the what kind of method they prefer, we have to follow those. So these are some of the citing of the works which we can show. So then we see that the methods, as we have already discussed, how this method can be shown in the scientific papers. It has to break down into 4 subsections, like the design, participants, material, and procedure. So each of these section is basically a statement. Is it an experimental design? Who was used? What was used? And what was said and done? That is what you are going to put. So these sections, they must be written in the third person to also avoid using the use of I and we. It has to be plural rather than what you call singular, or the what you call using the this one. So it should also give a good idea to write in the past tense too. That is, reactions times were recorded, rather than we will record the reaction times, isn't it? It should be in the past tense rather than the present. And this makes it when you are using this in the methodology, this makes it more professional, and it gives you lot of academic credibility. So when talking about the results, this is often the weakest section of the paper or the report, because it is the hardest section to get right, because you have to include so much of information in these results, because the people differ in how they like results is to be presented. That is very important. And basically, however, the following guidelines may, like you see the result section with a statement of what was being measured, that is rating of bizarreness of the images formed by the participant together with their score on a memory task. Like that, we need to do it. And the discussions, when you're talking about, this should begin with the reiteration of the results. Take care of use of plain English. This time it is, you see rather than using figures and statistical peak. And it should give results. I mean, the results agree with your initial prediction. When you should say this, and then you try to develop some theoretical argument to your account for this. So here the results you put when you put your results into some sort of context, then automatically the discussion will be fruitful. So the thoughts for the future research should also be discussed if possible, and in the light of your findings and the emergent explanation that needs to be done. So here one has to make sure that when you are discussing, you need to put the explanations of the other. So while giving the reference, we should see that you should list all the references that you have cited in the text. Yesterday we were talking about the reference and bibliography. So when you are listing it, you have to cite in your text. If you have referred to a work via secondary sources, then it is these secondary sources that must be listed here. You should get it in the habit of using the standard format for references, because these are very important, and always list the authors in alphabetical order. And it is in several publications that are listed the same author, then these should be arranged in the date of order. The most recent one in the first, then to his last work, because there is no nothing wrong in quoting the same author, the works of the same author, because he might have done a lot of work at different dates. So that can be what you call cited in the most recent one to the last one. So these are some of the important things that one needs to take care. So these are some of the the types of references that take in journal articles, like first Shepard, RN and Metzer, like that. In books, it comes in different way, and in chapters in books, it comes in a different way. So these are some of the formats that you actually use in different scientific writing articles and papers across the academic arena. So I stop here, sir. I think I have made a point here about the structure of thesis and dissertation writing.
Yes,
thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Very thank you, sir. Very thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Very useful and meaningful.
Sir.
Very nice session, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Any questions, sir? Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, the session is open for discussion.
Yes, participants are requested to ask their queries to the learned resource person, Sri Nagesh sir. Yes, participants, the session is open for discussion. If you are having any query, you can just unmute yourself and you can ask.
There must be two things. Either they have understood well, or they have understood nothing.
Understood well, sir. So they have no question.
Yeah, that is what I am.
They are not having any queries. आपने ऐसा पता है कि उनको क्या क्वेश्चन पूछने की जरूरत ही नहीं अभी.
Sir.
In simple language it was, and it is very effective. Yeah, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So I am very thankful to you, sir, for giving your valuable time to our institute. On behalf of Rajarshi Shah Mahavidyalaya Latur, our Honorable Principal Dr. Mahadevji Gawane, sir, our Research Advisory Committee, I am very thankful to you. And with the permission of the chair, I declare that this session is over. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
आपका ईमेल भेज दो सर.
हाँ सर, अभी भेजूंगा सर.
हाँ, उसमें मैं तुम्हारे को फॉर्म भेज देता हूँ गूगल फॉर्म.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Once again, sir. Thank you, sir. Lakshi.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
चलो मिलेंगे अभी हैदराबाद आने के बाद कभी तो अभी.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Okay.
I'm exiting, sir.
Yes.
You can close.
Participant.
Chup, Lakshman. Acha, you are, sir. Yo, Kayumku, Kayumku in a certificate deficiency. All exchange, what is the
Hello.
Welcome, sir.
Hello, good morning. Am I audible?
Yeah, sir, you are clearly audible. Your
Thank
sound
you.
is vivid.
Oh, okay.
Today we will start our second session. For the second session, we have availed Dr. Saurabh Chandra, sir, as our learned resource person. Dr. Saurabh Chandra, sir, is Senior Assistant Professor of Public Administration. He is working at Department of Public Administration in Assam, Don Bosco University, Guwahati, Assam. He has done his PhD from University of Lucknow. He is contributing in teaching also and as well as in research also. He has taught in the Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development, which is institute of national importance by the Act of Parliament. This institute is working under Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports, Government of India, Sri Perumbudur, Tamil Nadu. Dr. Saurabh Chandra has also performed several excellent academic invited lectures for students at different European and American universities. He is working in diverse areas of research such as decentralization, local governance, e-governance, etc. Dr. Chandra has also been awarded with Order for Research Leadership Award, which is given by Alfred Nobel University, Dnipro, Ukraine, Europe, in recognition of his outstanding research leadership abilities and contributions. Dr. Chandra is also working as Managing Director of Integrated Policy and Administrative Research Networking Foundation. Dr. Chandra is also working as Secretary General of RC10. It is Electronic Democracy Research Committee of International Political Science Association, which is founded by UNESCO and it is having its headquarters at Canada. Dr. Chandra is also a member of editorial board of 3 scientific journals, namely Journal of Alfred Nobel University, Dnipro, UK. The journals are indexed in a Web of Science. Web of Science is the indexing and abstracting services, Academic Review, European Vector of Economic Development, and Nobel Herald and Journal Editor of Socrates, an international referred journal, and indexed scholarly journal in public administration as well as in philosophy. As journal editor of Socrates, he has been able to publish more than 16 issues of research publications. As a sound researcher, he always loved to bring his unique skills as well as expertise to the various academic as well as research institute. We heartily welcome you, sir, on the behalf of our college, Rajarshi Shaw Mahavidyalaya Latur, on the behalf of our Honorable Principal, Dr. Mahadevji Gawane, sir, and Research Advisory Committee. Welcome, sir. You can proceed for your delightful lecture, sir.
Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. My warm regards to the Rajshri Shahu Mahavidyalaya, Latur, Honorable Principal, Secretary, and all the colleagues from that college. It is my privilege and honor to be to be associated with this activity, this workshop. So I would like to say in introduction that research has become such a wide and diverse field around the world that a lot of investments have been attracted towards research, but the proper research is very difficult to do, particularly all the universities, research centers, and around the globe. We are also associated with the Migration Institute of Finland. So it is very difficult to conduct researches on the contemporary issues. So I have prepared a PPT for the purpose. So if the organizers allow me, I would like to share it.
You can share it, sir. You are co-host now.
Okay.
Yeah, sir. It is
Yes,
visible.
sir. Yes.
Okay, the topic that has been assigned to me by the Honorable Organizing Committee is the research models. So for the purpose, it is very necessary to understand what is research. Research is all about going beyond our personal experiences, our thoughts, our ideas, our feelings, and our opinions. It is about referring to other sources of information to validate our own hypothesis. Normally, research is generally undertaken to explore an idea, to probe or investigate an ongoing issue. When we want to solve a problem or we want to make an argument in favor or in against of a well-established fact, that has to be turned to outside help. So this is the most common purpose of the research. We all know that the primary researchers are of normally two types. They are the primary researchers and the secondary researchers. So primary researchers are the researchers which are done through the first-hand experience, observation and investigation by the researchers himself. It involves analysis of the workplace, conducting of surveys or the interviews. It also involves carrying out laboratory experiments in the case of the natural sciences and building apparatus which will be contributing to the development of the science and technology. Then it also involves analysis of a literary or the historical text. For example, a documentary, a movie, or a performance. So all these are the areas that comes under the primary research. Some of the sources of the primary research are the first-hand experience, the first-hand information gathered by the researchers from the historical, from the legal documents, from the eyewitnesses accounts, from the result of the experiments, statistical data collected by the researcher, then the pieces of creative writing by the researchers himself or the art objects. All these are the primary sources of information. In social sciences, the primary data are often empirical studies, researches where direct observation is made when the researchers goes to the particular area and observes the activities, and on the basis of that activity, they try to interpret the whole scenario. So the statistical data that is collected by the researchers, the historical data, and the facts and the figures, they all contribute to the primary source of research. When it comes to secondary source of research or the secondary research, it involves the examination of the studies of other researchers. The major sources are the written documents, which are primary in nature, which have been written by some other researchers. It also includes the comments, the reviews, the interpretation, or the discussions about the original material. For example, the books, the articles, the research papers, the scientific data analyzed by other researchers, scientific databases, and literary works of other researchers, they all include the secondary source of research. So most researches nowadays are the combination of both the forms of researches. Both the primary and the secondary sources are involved nowadays in most of the researches. When we talk about the research models, there are majorly two types of research models or the research paradigms. The first one is the quantitative research model, and the second one is the qualitative research model. Qualitative research models are also known as traditional, positivist, experimental, or empiricist models. They were advocated and advanced by Comte, Mill, Durkheim, Newton, and Locke. Likewise, the qualitative research models are also known as constructivist, neutralistic, interpretive, and post-positivist or postmodern perspective. These were not only used by the major researchers from the very beginning of the research itself, they were advanced by the Dietry, the Kent, the Bedestan, the Forecast, the Mills, and the Huberman. These are all the two models. Now, what is the basic difference between the two models? When we talk about these models from the methodological assumptions, the question is, what is the process of research? What kind of process a researcher wants to use during the research? So the first thing is that in the quantitative research model, the researchers are using the deductive process. They are using the cause and effect mechanism. They are using the static research design. They are also using the context-free generalization that leads to predictions. Then the explanation and understanding and the accuracy and reliability testing. All these are parts of the quantitative research model. When we talk about the qualitative research model, the inductive processes, the mutual, the simultaneous shaping of factors, then the emerging designing categories identified during research processes, then the context, they are context bound, then the pattern and theories developed for understanding. These all come under the qualitative model. In the qualitative model, the accuracy and reliability testing is done through verification. In the quantitative research method or model, the accuracy and reliability is tested through the statistical measures, basically by the softwares. But in the qualitative, it is tested by the verification. The accuracy and reliability of the data and the interpretation as well as the result is tested through verification in the qualitative model, research model. So the question is, what type of model should be chosen by a researcher? Means, what are the reasons for choosing a model? There may be several reasons for choosing a paradigm or model. For example, the world view or assumptions of each paradigm. If every researcher or the scholar in the domain is using the same model, then we also will be motivated to use the same model or same paradigm. Next is the training and experience. If a scholar or a researcher is particularly trained and has the experience of using a particular model, then this will also motivate the researcher to choose between the quantitative and the qualitative research model. Then there are psychological attributes also, that what are the priorities and what are beneficial for the researcher. For example, if the trend or the tendency of the researcher is more towards the qualitative pattern, then he or she will choose the psychological, he will be choosing the qualitative model on the basis of his psychological attributions. Then next is the nature of the problem. What type of problem we are going to solve? What are our research questions? What are we trying to gain? What are we trying to validate? Or what are we trying to find out? These all comes under the nature of the problem. So the nature of the problem also determines the model that the researcher chooses. Then the audience of the study. Who are the audience? If the work or the published work has to be studied or has to be used or to be cited or referred by the audience, which mostly use the qualitative or the quantitative method, then obviously the researcher would like to choose the model which is mostly used by the audience. This is because when we use a particular model which is in trend, then the number of citations, they increase, and ultimately when the citations increase, the impact factor of the paper or the research, it also becomes very high, as well as it gets a very big reach. suppose there is increasing tendency of quantitative research in public administration nowadays, particularly not in India, but outside India, it has been from the last decade, it has been a tendency of using the quantitative method or the model. Then most of the researchers, they will tend towards the quantitative method or model, so that they can get a huge response, they can get a wide audience. So audience of the study is also a reason for choosing a model. So these are the reasons on the basis of which a researcher chooses a model. Now, we will talk about the quantitative model. We all know that quantitative model is all about numeric findings. We convert the variables into numbers and we try to find out the numeric solutions to the problems. It is different from the qualitative model. So the object of quantitative research model is to develop and use mathematical models, theories, and or hypotheses pertaining to various phenomena. So when we try to use the mathematical or the statistical tools to analyze the data which has been collected in the form of numbers, they are digital data. So the three basic elements of quantitative research model are concepts and constructs, variables, and the measurement. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So first, the concept and constructs. The concepts has been defined as, it is a term that expresses an abstract idea formed by generalization for particulars. It is formed by summarizing related observations. For example, the word house. Whenever we think about a house, we have a general concept that it will be visible or it will be observed like that. It will be having 4 walls, it will be having roof and the tiles, it will be having a dwelling place made up of some concrete structure, it will be having some furniture. So this is our concept about a house. In women's and gender studies, we all know that the gender is a different concept which denotes something, empowerment and the feminism. These all are used as the concepts. So the first is the concept. Then the construct. Construct is combination of concepts. When the different concepts they are combined. Construct is a combination of concepts that are difficult to observe directly, but can be inferred from a related behavioral pattern. For example, in gender studies, patriarchy. Patriarchy is an attribution that we cannot define or we cannot see, but it describes the state of social thinking, which is determined by concepts such as superiority of man, submission of women, exploitation of women, and violence against women. All these different concepts, they combine together and they formed a construct of patriarchy. Likewise, patriarchy cannot be seen, but it can be observed through different concepts. Another is the variable. In the quantitative models, there are various components, like the first one was the concept and constraints. Another one is the variable. What we do in the quantitative research is we find out the correlation between the different variables. We try to find out what exactly is the relationship between two different variables. The first variable is known as the dependent variable, and second variable is known as the independent variable. So in the quantitative research, the variables are studied so that the correlation or the dependency of one variable to another can be studied, and this dependency or this correlation explains our entire research and the conclusion. So variable is a phenomena or event that can be measured or manipulated. It is an entity that can take on different values. Researchers, what they do in the quantitative model is they attempt to test a number of associated variables to develop an underlying meaning or relationship among them. For example, education is one of the variables that is used to study the status of women. So education and the status of women, these are two different variables where the education will become the independent variable and the status of women will become the dependent variable. In the quantitative model, the researchers, they try to find out the association of these two variables. They want to find out the correlation between these two different variables because they are ultimately going to impact as well as the influence on one another. Another aspect of the quantitative method or model is the measurement. The process of measurement is central to quantitative research model. Quantitative research model requires that the variables, that is the independent as well as the dependent variable, under consideration can be measured. It provides the fundamental connection between empirical observation and mathematical expression of quantitative relationships. So we use the mathematical expressions like the statistics, the mean, median, mode, and all the different statistical software like the Stata, like the SPSS, like the R, to find out the relationship between the different variables. In simple terms, in measurement, the researcher assign numbers to numericals to objects, events, or properties according to certain rules. For example, if we are studying the correlation of the education with the unemployment, then we can say that we will be saying that unemployment increased by 5%. So the 5% is the numeric that we have. For example, if we say that the female literacy rate was 54% as estimated in 2001 census. So this 54 is a number, is a numeric that we can easily calculate. It is relatively easy to measure property like height, the weight, or the length and the time. These attributes, it becomes very easy to calculate while using the quantitative model. But when it comes to the beauty, when it comes to the friendship, the values, it becomes very difficult. For example, the reason, the emotions, why some person chooses a religion. These things are very abstract and it becomes very difficult for a quantitative model to measure these aspects of the researches. Now, some limitations of the quantitative model. The quantitative research models or the method may be inappropriate in many areas of life. It is my personal experience that whenever a researcher goes for a research, he normally begins with the primary research, but without the subjectivity, the research will always remain incomplete. The quantitative research model, it becomes very inappropriate and difficult to measure or to find out the answers to various questions that are concerned with various areas of life. For example, what are the reasons for forming the friendship? What are the emotional backgrounds for love and marriages? What are the reasons for choosing a religion, or how to evaluate the work of art? These all are based on the subjective experiences. They cannot be objectified. So the first limitation is that the quantitative research method or the model cannot answer the questions which require subjectivity or the subjective experiences. Second is the measurement process. It entirely depends or rely on understanding of reality as an outsider by the researcher, whereas the participants, the respondents, may have different understanding of a particular phenomena. So this type of research, the researcher completely believes on the data that numerics collected by them, but these data or the numerics can be manipulated depending upon the participants or the respondents. The mindset of the respondents or the mindset of the participants ultimately determine the type of the data that has been collected by the researcher. That to solve that problem, to solve this limitation, what researchers do in the research process is that they test the numeric through reliability testing, and that is also that is also done by the many softwares. So they try to validate the data collected as well as they do the reliability testing. But ultimately, it is the subjectivity that comes in between the actual findings, because all of we, I believe that we are from public administration. We remember the heartphone experiment. When the heartphone experiment was done, it was found out that the workers, they were helping each other to increase the productivity. So what makes them to help each other, or what will influence the human being, it is completely subjective, that cannot be determined or measured by the quantitative models or the methods. Then another is that the quantitative research also overlooks certain specific variations, as it needs sufficient numbers to generalize. So what exactly participants, and 5 of them are having the opinion that this particular dress or this particular product is good. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So if we have 10 participants, and out of the 10 participants, the 5 participants are with the impression that particular product is good, and the 5 and rest of them are having the unstable opinion. Some are having no opinion at all. In that case, the quantitative researchers or the model will generalize it. But the subjectivity, the human brain, it also concludes while doing the quantitative researches based on certain models, the researchers come with this problem that they are not being able to accept the conclusions. Why? Because their own subjectivity comes in the way, and they think that this kind of generalization is not possible. So this ultimately leads to chaos in areas or the phenomenons which requires subjective experiences as well as the subjective intellect of the researcher. So this is another limitation of the quantitative model. After the quantitative model, which is, we have another model of research, that is the qualitative model. Qualitative model is a subjective model. It is based on the researchers, his own ideas, thoughts, and opinions that he ultimately wants to validate. So qualitative research model, it focuses on the study of the complex human and social problems. These problems cannot be studied through the numbers, through the quantitative methods, or through the quantitative models. So these models, the qualitative model, it focuses on the study of a complex human and social problems in totality. They do not use the scientific method much. Unlike scientific method of concentrating on the study of fragmented variables or situations or events. So when researchers, they use this kind of model, the qualitative model, they do not depend entirely upon the numbers, they do not entirely depend upon the scientific methods, and their study is fragmented in such a way that they also involve their own subjectivity to the study, which is a limitation at the end. But this is what the researchers do while using the qualitative models. So qualitative research model places the main emphasis on the researcher. who narrates and interprets phenomena in terms of meaning derived from people's experiences, events, etc. Hence, human and subjective approach is highlighted. So, ultimately, in the qualitative research model, the subjective approach and the human aspect of the researcher is highlighted. The studies are conducted in a natural setting, that is to observe the events without making any manipulation or controls on variables studied. It involves a variety of data gathering techniques and approaches of qualitative nature. For example, the case studies, the interviews conducted by the researchers, the dialogue with the persons involved, the participants, the observations, the scientific observations of the researchers, their own personal experiences, their own life stories, they all become part of the qualitative research model. So the visual data like the photography, these all become the part of the qualitative research model. So these data are gathered from a variety of qualitative research sources. So why a researcher chooses a qualitative research model? The first reason is that there are problems which cannot be solved through numbers. So to find out answers to different kinds of research questions about the phenomena under investigation, such as what happens, how does it takes place, why did it takes place, or what are the causes of certain effect. So to find out the answer of these different type of research questions, the researchers, they prefer the qualitative research models. So qualitative research models are also preferred in the context of initial level of theoretical research. Whenever a researcher goes for a research, the first problem that occurs before him or her is that they do not find any well-established research model. They have to choose between the already existing models like the qualitative and the quantitative models. So, and for every researcher, it is very difficult to have an in-depth knowledge of the statistics or the mathematics or having a background of the natural sciences. So they prefer to choose the qualitative method or the model. Another is certain research problems need holistic treatment. To gain an in-depth knowledge of certain event or certain research problem, it is very essential for the researchers to understand the historical aspect of the problem. How, if the research question or the research problem cannot be studied in the holistic way, ultimately the researcher will remain unsatisfied with the work. So to study the problem, study the research problem in a holistic way, the researchers, they choose the qualitative research models. Unlike experimental studies where the researcher intends to explain a cause and effect relationship in a controlled laboratory settings, the qualitative method is preferred to conduct the study without disturbing neutrality in setting. So what researchers do is that they do not disturb the neutrality of the area. They do not disturb the neutrality of the lives of the people or the participants. They observe, they collect data, they put their own subjectivity, they try to validate and verify everything, also involving their subjectivity, to find answers of different research questions. Another reason for choosing the qualitative model is the limitation of quantitative inquiry, limited variables. For example, when we talk about the domestic violence, we can easily calculate the number of women who have witnessed the domestic violence. But what about the emotional violence? What about the subjective aspects of the violence? These cannot be converted into numbers, and these cannot be converted and measured in numbers. So there are various limitations of the quantitative inquiries or the models. That is why the researchers, they prefer to use the qualitative method, so that they can understand the whole aspect, the qualitative model is that the nature of certain problems. The nature of certain problem is such, the role of a researcher plays a very vital subjective role than objective and impersonal role. For example, if we see a person from a tribal community, if he or she wants to study a research problem that has occurred in his own tribe, then it will be very important that he gets involved in it on the subjective or the impersonal level. So in this case also, the researchers, they will tend to choose the qualitative research model. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Continue, sir. No problem.
So when we talk about the qualitative research model, there are many varieties of traditions of qualitative studies that exist in social sciences. There are various models. So they have all been categorized as the biographical studies, the phenomenological studies, the grounded theory studies, the ethnography. Ethnography is becoming very popular nowadays. Then the case study. All these are different categories of the qualitative research models. So every research method or different research methods have their own uniqueness with regard to the focus of the study. For example, the biography, it is used to explore the life of an individual, whereas the phenomenological inquiry is used to understand the essence of experiences of persons about a phenomena. The grounded theory approach, it is adopted to develop a theory grounded in data from the field. Ethnography, which is very popular nowadays, aims at describing and interpreting a cultural or social group. Here I want to give you an example that in our university, a student of MA, we have a severe, I am currently in Assam, and what I have observed through the newspapers is that there is a severe problem of insurgency, then the drugs and all these things in the border areas. So a girl who came from a border area, she's a tribal, she worked on these drug peddlers, and recently she got a book published, that is a ethnograph, and she also got an award from the publishing agency. So these kind of studies, ethnography, are very much preferred as well as recommended nowadays. So ethnography, it aims at describing and interpreting a social and cultural group. Then we have the case study, which is used to develop an in-depth analysis of a single case or multiple cases. We have a lot of case studies, how the government reacted in the time of the pandemic. So these case studies are also the part of the qualitative research models. So all these models or the methods, they adopt qualitative techniques of data collection. For example, the interviews, the observations, the study of documents, then the relevant records, etc. And they incorporate descriptive and narrative approaches of data analysis. So once the researcher has collected the data, they try to describe it, they try to narrate it through their findings, through their research findings. Like the quantitative research models, the qualitative research model also has some certain limitations. For example, it is very time-consuming process. It is very time-consuming process because the researcher has to collect the data, as well as they have to study everything holistically. Another thing is that they have to be involved in the research on the subjective level. They have to do a lot of brainstorming while finding the conclusions. So it takes a lot of time. While in the quantitative researches, the researchers do not go into so deep. They just see a phenomena, an event, and they collect the data, and they analyze it, they create the variables, and they solve the problems, they solve the research questions in limited time, and they produce a research study. But in the qualitative, it is a limitation that it is very time consuming. Second thing is that no result verification in qualitative research. As qualitative research is mostly open-ended, the participants have more control over the content of the data collected. So the researchers is not able to verify the results objectively against the scenarios stated by the respondents. So as we previously discussed, that in the qualitative research model, many things are in the hands of the respondents. What if the respondents do not provide the accurate information? How this information will be validated? Because without the verification and validation of the data, the conclusions cannot be accurate. So this is one of the shortcomings or limitations of the qualitative research model. Another is, it is a labor intensive process. It takes a lot of labor. The qualitative study requires a lot of labor because it takes a lot of process, like the categorization, like the recording and the documentation. So these things makes the entire process very lengthy as well as labor intensive. Another limitation of the qualitative research model is that it is very difficult to investigate the causality. Researchers find it difficult to investigate causality between different research phenomena. Qualitative research is a little complex to explain the difference in the quality and quantity of information obtained from different respondents and arriving at non-consistent conclusions. So this is also a limitation of the qualitative research model. So this was all about the first session. I believe that it will be very short and sweet. So in the next session, we will be discussing about the different models. Here, when selecting a research model, it is usually advisable to consider whether you can base your work on an earlier theoretical model or not. Sometimes a model, even a preliminary one, can help you work decisively, and in such a case, it will also affect the logical process of analysis. So whenever a researcher, they begin to do the research, they want to choose a model. There are various qualitative and quantitative models that can be adopted, that can be used by the researchers. For example, the model for calculating the ethical aspects in the bureaucracy. There are various models that we will study in the next session. We will also study the exploratory research where we do not have any model. We will also study in the next session the expanding or refining, how to refine and expand an earlier model, and the research for testing hypothesis. So all these topics we will be covering under the second session. I hope, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, no problem, sir.
Okay, so I hope my session was not so big, but why to overburden the participants? So in the next session, I will be covering all these topics, the models, different models that are the models of qualitative and quantitative research. In this session, I just wanted to give an holistic introduction to the quantitative and the qualitative models.
Okay, thank you, sir. Very thanks to your valuable lecture for the research students, research fellow. Now this session is open for discussion. All the participants are requested. If you have any queries, any doubt, you can ask question to our honorable today's resource person. Participants, this session is open for discussion. Participant, you have any question?
I think they were not able to understand why.
No. They have very highly understand. So they have no question.
Yes, sir.
No questions.
Okay, I have a question of for the participants.
Yes,
Anyone involved in any kind of experimental research?
Participant, are you audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Arti Bagmare.
Yes, sir.
Yes. You have any doubt, you can ask.
No, sir. No doubt.
Okay, Aarti, are you a research scholar?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what kind of research you are doing now?
सर अभी वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट पे अभी स्टार्ट किया है सर.
बहुत अच्छा. तो आपका टॉपिक क्या है रिसर्च का?
एम्पावरमेंट एंड अपलिफ्टमेंट ऑफ वुमेन एम्प्लॉयड इन लातूर डिस्ट्रिक्ट.
ओह वंडरफुल. सो आप क्या पता करना चाहती हैं इस रिसर्च के थ्रू?
सर इस रिसर्च के थ्रू सर अभी क्या हो रहा है ना, जैसे अभी 50% हमारे देश में 50% महिलाएं, लेकिन वो अभी उतना नहीं कर पा रही, उनको इक्वालिटी नहीं मिल पा रही है, तो उनको वो हक नहीं मिल पा रहे उनके लिए. सो उस पर मैं स्टडी करने वाली हूँ.
अच्छा, मतलब आप कैसे स्टडी करने वाली हूँ?
एक्चुअली सर मैंने अभी उतना किया नहीं इसमें, अभी स्टार्ट किया क्योंकि REC मेरी इसी मंथ में हुई है, सो अभी स्टार्ट करने वाली हूँ.
अच्छा, क्या समस्याएं हैं महिलाओं को आपके जिले में?
अभी यहाँ पे देखा जाए तो जो एम्प्लॉयड महिला है, पहले तो अनएम्प्लॉयड महिला पे बहुत ज्यादा है, लेकिन एम्प्लॉयड हक के लिए नहीं लड़ पाती, उनको उतने राइट्स नहीं दिए जाते. इक्वालिटी तो है, अनइक्वालिटी तो है, लेकिन इक्वालिटी चाहिए ना अभी, क्योंकि जैसे अभी देखा जाए तो पुरुष और महिला इक्वली वर्क करती है, लेकिन अगर देखा जाए तो इनकम पुरुष को ज्यादा दिया जाता है, महिलाओं को नहीं. और किसी भी वो बोलते हैं ना कि सर मुझे हिंदी उतना नहीं आता, ट्राई कर रही हूँ.
बहुत अच्छी बात कर रहे हैं हिंदी में आप, नो प्रॉब्लम.
सर तो मतलब क्या बोलते हैं कि उतना प्रेफरेंस नहीं दिया जाता वुमेन्स को.
चलिए, आपको बहुत शुभकामनाएं. आप अच्छा सा प्रोड्यूस कीजिए एक अच्छा सा रिसर्च.
थैंक यू
जी.
सोनोने सर, डॉक्टर सोनोने
सर. हेलो.
You have any question, Sonone sir? Okay, sir. No question, participant. Okay, sir. Your सर आपका नेक्स्ट लेक्चर जो है ना सर,
हाँ सर 28 को है आई थिंक
38 को है क्या? 28 यस सर 28 को है।
हाँ सर 28
आपका लेटर तो मिल गया सर? ओके ओके ओके। So I am very thanks to behalf our institute and our honorable principal Dr. Mahadevji Gawani sir and our total research advisory committee. I am very thanks to you. You deliver the very meaningful and thoughtful lectures today. This is useful for the total our participant research fellow. Once again, I am very thanks to you, and I am declare to this session is over. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the invitation.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Our next session will be start participant. Our next session will be start sharp 2 o'clock. Sharp 2 o'clock. Okay. Our session is over.